Most people live their lives reacting instead of directing. They wake up thinking about what they must get done, who they must answer to, and what tasks are waiting for them. This way of thinking keeps a person busy, but it rarely makes them significant. A task-oriented mindset is focused on activity, not impact. It asks, what is on my to-do list, rather than what result am I trying to create? A vision-oriented mindset begins with purpose. Instead of starting the day with tasks, it starts with direction. Leaders think from the end backward. They define the outcome first and then align their actions with that outcome. This approach transforms work into progress. When you know where you are going, you stop wasting energy on things that don't move you forward. Thinking like a leader means understanding that being busy is not the same as being effective. Many people confuse movement with achievement. They fill their days with small actions but never step back to ask if those actions matter. Leaders pause to evaluate. They ask better questions. Is this necessary? Is this the best use of my time? Does this contribute to the bigger picture? A vision-oriented thinker also learns to prioritize. Not everything deserves equal attention. Leaders identify the few activities that create the greatest results and give them their best energy. They know that success is not about doing everything. It is about doing the right things consistently. When you shift from tasks to vision, your confidence grows. You are no longer just completing assignments, you are building something meaningful. This shift gives work a deeper sense of purpose and transforms ordinary effort into intentional progress over time. This way of thinking separates those who merely stay busy from those who truly move ahead in life. Responsibility is the line that separates growth from stagnation. When a person avoids responsibility, they also avoid power. Because the moment you blame circumstances, people, or luck, you give away control of your results. Leaders understand that responsibility is not a burden, it is a privilege. By accepting responsibility for outcomes, they gain the ability to change those outcomes. This shift alone elevates a person from being managed by life to actively shaping it. A disciplined mind is what allows responsibility to turn into results. Many people wait to feel inspired before they act, but inspiration is unpredictable. Discipline, on the other hand, is a decision made in advance. Leaders commit to standards, not moods. They do what needs to be done whether they feel like it or not, because they understand that feelings follow action, not the other way around. Over time, this discipline builds self-respect, and self-respect fuels confidence. Self-management is the quiet foundation of leadership. Before you can lead projects, influence outcomes, or inspire others, you must first lead yourself. This means managing your time instead of letting it slip away, managing your habits instead of reacting to impulses, and managing your attitude instead of allowing circumstances to control it. Leaders recognize that small daily choices compound into powerful long-term results. A worker waits for external structure, deadlines, supervision, reminders. A leader creates internal structure. They set personal deadlines, establish routines, and hold themselves accountable. They do not need someone watching to do their best work because they have developed inner standards that guide their behavior. This inner discipline becomes a competitive advantage, especially in environments where freedom and opportunity are high. Responsibility also changes how challenges are viewed. Instead of asking why something is unfair, leaders ask what can be learned. Mistakes are not identity, they are information. Feedback, even when uncomfortable, is welcome because it reveals where growth is needed. This learning-oriented mindset turns setbacks into stepping stones rather than stopping points. When responsibility, discipline, and self-management come together, consistency is born. Consistency is what separates potential from performance. Anyone can act wisely once in a while, but leaders act wisely most of the time. They understand that excellence is not an event, it is a habit, As this way of living continues, something powerful happens. Trust increases, both self-trust and the trust of others. Opportunities expand because dependable people are always in demand. Responsibility, discipline, and self-management do not just improve performance, they quietly transform character. And in the end, character is what sustains success long after motivation fades. Value creation is the true currency of success. Titles, positions, and recognition may open doors, but it is usefulness that keeps those doors open. Leaders understand that the marketplace does not reward intention or effort alone. It rewards results that solve problems and improve lives. This is why leadership thinking is deeply connected to growth. The more you develop yourself, the more value you are able to offer. Personal growth begins with the decision to keep learning. Leaders are students for life. They read, observe, reflect, and ask questions not because they are forced to, but because they understand that ignorance is expensive. Every new skill learned, every perspective gained increases their capacity to contribute. Growth is not accidental, it is intentional and disciplined. A worker often asks, "What do I need to do to get by?" A leader asks, "What can I learn to become better?" This question shifts focus from survival to excellence. Leaders invest time and energy into improving their communication, decision-making, and problem-solving abilities because these skills multiply their effectiveness in every area of life. When your skill level rises, your opportunities naturally expand. Contribution is what gives work meaning. Leaders think beyond personal gain and consider impact. They look for ways to add value to people, teams, and systems. This mindset creates influence because people naturally follow those who make things better. Leadership is not about authority, it is about usefulness. The more helpful you become, the more influential you become. Growth also requires humility. Leaders recognize that they do not know everything, and that realization keeps them open. Feedback is not taken as an attack, but as guidance. Constructive criticism becomes a tool for refinement rather than a reason for defensiveness. This openness accelerates development and prevents stagnation. Problem solving is where value becomes visible. Leaders do not wait for ideal conditions. They work with what they have. They approach problems with curiosity instead of frustration. Each problem solved builds confidence and credibility. Over time, a pattern forms. People begin to rely on you, not because you demand respect, but because you consistently deliver solutions. As value increases, results follow naturally. Income, recognition, and opportunity are not chased. They are attracted. This is why leaders focus on becoming more rather than demanding more. They understand that success is not something you pursue directly. It is something that arrives as a consequence of who you have become. When personal growth and contribution become a way of life, progress becomes inevitable. You stop competing on effort alone and start standing out through value. This approach creates a lasting form of success, one that grows stronger with time and leaves a meaningful impact on others. Ownership is a mindset long before it is a legal status. Leaders do not wait for a title, a position, or permission to act like owners. They take full accountability for their choices, their performance, and their direction. When something needs improvement, they do not point outward. They look inward and ask what they can control. This way of thinking creates power because control over self is the highest form of control. Decision-making is at the center of this mindset. Workers hesitate, waiting for instructions or approval, afraid of making mistakes. Leaders understand that indecision is often more costly than a wrong decision. They gather the best information they can, make a choice, and then take responsibility for the outcome. If the decision fails, they adjust. Progress comes from movement, not from standing still. Thinking like an owner also changes how time and resources are treated. Leaders see time as an investment, not something to be spent carelessly. They ask where their attention is going and whether it is producing a return. Distractions are recognized at hidden costs. Focus becomes a discipline, and priorities are protected. This intentional use of time compounds into remarkable results over the years. Leaders also think beyond the present moment. They understand that today's actions shape tomorrow's reality. Instead of reacting to life as it comes, they design their future through daily choices. This long-term perspective allows them to endure temporary discomfort without losing direction. They are willing to sacrifice convenience now to gain freedom later. Creating the future requires initiative. Leaders do not wait for perfect conditions because perfect conditions rarely arrive. They act with what they have, where they are. Small decisions made consistently begin to shape new circumstances. Momentum is built through action, and clarity often follows commitment. Ownership also influences how leaders relate to failure. Failure is not an identity, it is feedback. When something doesn't work, leaders analyze, learn, and refine. They do not quit because quitting solves nothing. Persistence, guided by learning, becomes a defining trait. As this mindset deepens, confidence grows. Not the loud kind, but the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you can handle what comes next. You trust yourself because you have proven through repeated action that you will show up and adapt. When you stop waiting for the future and start creating it, life shifts from being something that happens to you into something you shape. This is the essence of leadership thinking. It turns potential into progress and intention into reality, one deliberate decision at a time. Leadership thinking ultimately demands a higher standard for how you live, act, and decide. It is the decision to stop operating at the lowest level of expectation and start operating at the level of potential. Most people settle into patterns that feel familiar, even when those patterns limit growth. Leaders challenge those patterns. They raise their personal standards, knowing that life rarely rises above what you consistently tolerate. A leader understands that standards shape destiny. What you accept becomes normal, and what becomes normal eventually becomes permanent. This is why leaders are intentional about what they allow into their minds, their habits, and their environment. They choose growth over comfort, truth over excuses, and progress over perfection. High standards are not about pressure, they are about direction. Leadership thinking also requires courage. The courage to think independently, to stand apart from the crowd, and to act without universal approval. Leaders know that following the crowd rarely leads to extraordinary results. They are willing to be misunderstood for a season because they are committed to a longer vision. This courage strengthens character and builds inner resilience. Another critical element is consistency. Leadership is not proven in dramatic moments alone, but in daily discipline. Small actions repeated over time create remarkable outcomes. Leaders do not rely on bursts of effort. They rely on steady commitment. They show up when it is inconvenient, work when it is uncomfortable, and stay focused when distractions are everywhere. Leadership thinking also refines communication. Leaders are careful with their words, both spoken and unspoken. They understand that language shapes thinking, and thinking shapes behavior. Instead of saying, "I can't," they ask, "How can I?" Instead of saying it's not possible, they ask, "What would it take?" This shift opens doors that a limiting mindset keeps closed. Perhaps most importantly, leadership thinking is grounded in purpose. Leaders know why they are doing what they are doing. Purpose provides energy when motivation fades. It gives meaning to sacrifice and direction to effort. When your actions are aligned with a clear purpose, persistence becomes natural. Over time, this way of thinking changes identity. You no longer see yourself as someone trying to succeed, but as someone becoming capable. Confidence grows not from ego, but from evidence. You trust yourself because you have practiced discipline, faced challenges, and kept your commitments. Leadership is not about controlling others. It is about mastering yourself. When you think like a leader, your choices improve, your habits strengthen, and your future expands. This mindset does not just improve results, it reshapes who you become. And in the end, who you become is the greatest achievement of all. When you step back and look at everything together, one truth becomes clear. Leadership begins in the mind. The difference between a worker and a leader is not talent, luck, or position, but the way they think, choose, and act each day. When you shift from tasks to vision, from excuses to responsibility, from comfort to growth, and from waiting to ownership, your life starts moving in a new direction. These principles work quietly but powerfully. Discipline replaces dependence on motivation. Value creation replaces the chase for reward. Long-term thinking replaces short-term reactions. As your standards rise, so do your results. You stop being controlled by circumstances and start shaping them through intentional decisions and consistent action. Leadership is not something you arrive at one day. It is something you practice daily. Every choice to take responsibility, to learn, to act with purpose, and to hold yourself to a higher standard reinforces this mindset. Over time, these small decisions compound into confidence, influence, and meaningful success. When you think like a leader, you no longer ask life for permission to grow. You decide, you commit, and you act. And in doing so, you discover that leadership is not about ruling others, but about mastering yourself and creating a future that reflects your highest potential.